Hello, Medfield visitors out there. Welcome to the newest edition of Medfield People. My guest today is Bill Mann, who probably a lot of you know from police details now, but I remember him mainly as a police captain and a police, what?
Chief.
Chief. I don't think I was around when you were just a policeman. I don't think so.
Oh, sure you were.
I was? Okay, tell me, when did you join the Medfield Police Department?
I joined the Medfield Police in 1959 in March. And I had taken the exam before I went in the Army in 1950 or 51, but I didn't do I failed the, what they call the physical exam, and
Okay.
not a physical exam, it's a strength test, that's what they called
fitness
it.
kind of thing.
I didn't run fast enough, I was so heavy, and I didn't realize that I had to run on a time thing. But then I took it again when I was still in the service. I was back here from Germany, and I was still in the service station in Boston, and I took the exam in 54 or 55, and eventually in 59 I got on. But
Do you remember who the selectmen were that appointed you?
the selectmen that appointed me, I would
Farrar?
say, were Harvey Hamilton and
Or for me?
Buck Buchanan and Joe Roberts.
Oh, Joe Roberts.
The previous administration would not put me on, and I ended up with an extension because I was in the service, and my list extended, and so I got on in 59 when there was a change on the board of 2 people. That's the time they appointed the new chief, too, Kingsbury.
I was just going to ask you that.
I met a fellow.
Alan Kingsbury?
Alan Kingsbury.
Okay.
I met a fellow on the street after I'd become a police officer, and he said to me, "Oh, it's good to see you on the police department. You'll be chief in 10 years." I said, "I doubt it. I'm 31. The chief is 32." I said, and the circumstances happened that 10 years later I was. In August of '69, I became the chief.
Yeah, okay. We were here when you became chief. That I remember.
Yeah.
That I do remember. That was great. So you grew up here in Medfield, I believe?
Yes, yes.
Where?
Technically, I was born in Millis, so I'm not a full-fledged native, but moved to Medfield when I was 6 years old, 1934, and went through Wheelock School down on Pleasant Street, and then went up to the PAF Center, which was the high school. And lo and behold, then the Wheelock School burned down, so we had double sessions at the PAF Center for a few years. So.
Do you remember any of your classmates? Any of them still around
Oh,
here?
yeah,
Herbie Burr.
Herbie Burr.
Joe Ryan, classmate?
No, Franny Ryan was my first guy I met in Medfield, oddly enough. When my mother brought me down to Wheelock School, I met Franny Ryan in the parking lot. And we became friends until he went this way and I went that way, but he died a few years ago. It's Joe Ryan's brother. Mm-hmm. Herbie Burr, Walter Reynolds died this past year or so. June Kelly, June Hinckley Kelly.
I didn't realize she was your classmate.
Yeah, Clint Clark, who died a year ago.
He was a great guy.
Herb Burr is still alive. June Kelly's still alive, and I can't think of anybody else in Medfield off the top of my head, but Eleanor Farris chick is in Florida, I believe, still alive, and Nancy Platt, the only
she was
colored girl in town. Yeah. She was in our class the whole time. Nobody knew she was colored. We just knew she was another gal.
Yeah, who cares?
She went to every dance. She went to every party we had, whatever.
That's the way town should be.
Great gal, yeah.
So
I haven't seen her for years.
Did you really like being in the police department immediately, or did you have some hesitation there?
Well, when I was in the Army, they put me in the military police, so I had 5.5 years of military police, and I had a lot of good training in the military police, so I was looking forward to it when I get out. Or even before I got out, I took the exam while I was still in the Army. Yeah, I immediately took to it. I mean, Bill Griffin and I went on the same time in 1959, and I think we arrested everybody that looked the wrong way. If they broke the law, we had them. We learned the hard way by calling up the Westwood lieutenant or sergeant and saying, "What do I do now?" And they would tell us that "Oh yeah, you got a good case. You arrested him for such and such." And it was truly the school of hard knocks.
But the town's changed a lot since those times. Even since I came in the end of '64. I mean, when we came, Indian Hill was being built, Pine Needle Park was being built, Long Meadow Estates was being built, Marlin Road developed. I mean,
Oh yeah, that's
It
it's
just
so.
doubled.
The mileage in the town on the roads is increased greatly. But yeah, the town kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the population at the state hospital gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But it says that at one point we had more people, or at least about the same amount of people at the state hospital, which they call Medfield residents, as we did in town. But that changed over the years. Yeah, the town has grown so big now. I mean, it's still a small town, but it's quite different, a different makeup.
It is different. Even in the 49 years I've been here, it's a very different town. I just hope we help keep it a good town.
Oh, I think it is, and you know, it's the same thing. When I was promoted to chief in 1969, we had some wild kids, if you will. They were at the stage of disputing authority, and that went on for a few years, and then gradually things got better and better, and I think this turned out, you know, my last few years on the police department, the kids were really good, I thought. And you know the wise guys have trouble with the little minority group of wise guys, but overall they were, and the parents were so good too. And I've heard other police departments saying, dealing with these damn parents, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I disagree with that. I said, I find that we call kids in and ask them about something, and a parent would say, if you know anything, you tell them. We never had trouble with that kid again. The parent that came in and said, who said my kid they got involved in this? I'm going to get a lawyer. Usually that was the kid maybe we had some trouble with, you know. So parents were very good, I thought, overall. Very good.
One of the things I remember most about you, you used to walk over town. You went to, I think, all kinds of sporting events. You went to everything, I think, going in Medfield, you'd see you there, you know, with your wife Elizabeth often. But the walking around town, I think it was great. And one day you called me, one of my sons, who shall be nameless, was in the shower, and you called me afterward and you said, I was walking down Pine Street and I saw your yellow Toyota going like a bat out of hell. And you weren't sure which kid was driving it, and I said, can we put him on the wanted list? Remember this?
Yeah.
And you said, there isn't anyone wanted list, but we'll make one. So when he came out of the shower, I said, you were caught speeding, and you're on the wanted list. And when he was in college, he asked me to get him off the wanted list.
Yeah.
I think you might have saved his life. Honest to Pete, too.
I have this belief, I still believe in this, is when kids go to driver's ed, then they start driving the car, and they're a little nervous, and they're feeling their way along, and then they get their license. And once they get confident behind the wheel, I've always felt that the best thing could happen to them if they get caught speeding.
I agree
Not
with you.
necessarily a ticket, but that they get caught and realize, or if they have a close call, fortunately no accident, it sometimes is the greatest thing for them, I think, because they learn to realize that, you know, 30 miles an hour is fast at a certain point. You know, like my own daughter got in an accident one time, and she ran into the back end of a car that was taking a left turn, and I said, how fast are we going? She said, 40. I said, obviously that was too fast. She said, the sign said 40. I said, the sign didn't say you must go 40. It said that's the maximum you can go. So obviously it's too fast. But I had doing my wife's crossing out here at the Metacomet and South one day years ago, and a gal late for school came through from I had just stepped off to the side because traffic had gotten light and no kids were walking. She came through that intersection like a son of a gun, and a car was going through on South Street, and he braked and she braked, and they just came so close to having a collision. And then she drove off to schools. Well, I knew who she was, so I caught her the next day, and I gave her a little lecture about it, and she was shaking still. So she realized it was probably the best thing that happened to her.
I think it is.
You know, even because there was no accident, it sure shook up the fellow driving on South Street. He was shook up, and he said, what are you going to do about that? I said, I will see her. I know who it is. And so,
because I know when I was 16 or 17, I thought I was going to live forever.
Yeah,
you know, and then I could drive, you know, I wouldn't have to worry about it because I'm immortal, you know, and then all of a sudden you hear of somebody in an accident That's killed. What is that the worst thing you ever had to do as a police chief? Go to a family after a fatal accident?
Oh yeah, I had a lot of those. Knock on the door, and usually it's not a middle of the day thing. It's usually middle of the night or 2 in the morning or something, and tell them that their loved one has died, their son or their daughter has been killed in a car accident.
So you did this personally?
I did it personally. I believed I should because I was in charge. I think the dirtiest trick that happened to me was that a fellow got killed in Medfield, but he was from Bellingham, so we called the Bellingham police and told them to make a notification. And lo and behold, I get a call from the parent.
Oh.
I was told to call.
Oh, geez.
Oh, I didn't like telling him over the phone, but what could I do? So I had to tell him over the phone what happened. I mean, that to me was a dirty trick.
Yeah,
I've also gotten calls from out of town police asking me to make a notification in Medfield where their child resided in Medfield and was killed in another town, and I didn't mind that. I mean, I understand they're not going to come to Medfield, so that didn't bother me too much.
Well, don't people kind of flinch if the doorbell rings at 10 o'clock at night and the
When
police
they see the
chief is
police
standing
chief
there?
coming to the door, they
I
know
would
there's
know.
something wrong.
That's exactly what I would
I'm
think.
sure they must know right away because I ask for the spouse, is your wife here or is your husband here? And get the both of them in the room together. But they know right away.
I would think so.
That was the worst feeling while I was waiting for that other spouse to come in the room because I knew
They know
they
something's
know
wrong.
something's wrong. And I used to go there once in a while for something, maybe I don't know, some little minor message to deliver or something, and I would say, I'm not here, I'm only here to deliver a message. Because I knew they would probably say, oh my gosh, he's coming in our house, what for? I said, it's tough not to be wanted.
Wouldn't suicides be even harder?
Yeah, suicide.
And I know several that
Yeah,
you probably
quite a
had
few
to,
of them, yeah. Unfortunately, we had a few, and I never liked that either. That was worse, I think. Yeah.
To me, it's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear that their loved one has done that on purpose, you know.
I've heard, somebody told me later that suicide's the most selfish thing anybody can do because it puts all the onus and the horrible stuff on their family members
Yeah.
and their friends, and I think that's probably true.
I think it probably is too. I don't know.
Wow, so that's the bad part about being a police chief. Is there a good thing about being a police chief?
Sometimes the kids would get an assignment as a senior or a junior to come in and interview a town official, so they get assigned to interview the police chief, and they'd say, well, what do you do? And I'd say, well, the first thing I can tell you is I'm the complaint department in the town, because
I thought I was.
mostly, yeah, you are. Mostly people are calling me when they want to complain about something. But I found the job rewarding in the long run because all the downs were overshadowed by all the pluses. You know, sometimes you do some little thing for somebody, or the police department has, and they thank me for it. They were happy about it and thanking me, and you know, I in turn have to thank the officers because they did the right thing.
I know one nice thing you did for me is back in 1978, we had a death at the Legion Hall, I believe at a wedding. And we didn't have paramedics then, so we had to call. We started CPR, we had to call. We found out later it took, I wasn't at the wedding, but they called 911, but they didn't call 911 for 10 or 11 minutes after the person collapsed. So my husband and I and Joan Kiesling and Bob Curry decided we were going to become CPR instructors.
Oh, yeah.
And we started teaching it in 1978, and you joined us a few years later, and you and I eventually ran it. I couldn't tell you, 30 years straight that we ran CPR.
Yeah, I was a CPR instructor from about 83, I think it was,
Yeah,
or
when you-
82
when you
until,
joined us, yep.
until 2008 when we
When we-
decided we were getting too old for it. Yeah, what happened there is we used to have access to the mannequins when I was the boss, and then when we were doing it after I retired, we had trouble getting the mannequins.
We kept them in my barn.
So we ended up raising some money by teaching and buying our own. So we did a good job there for a long time, and we didn't take any pay. we 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 believed in teaching people CPR was a good thing, which I still believe. And we did it till 2008.
Yeah.
We stopped.
Do you remember we started a program at the high school?
We taught at the high school sometimes 7 periods a day or 6 periods a day
Absolutely.
for many years.
Did it right out in the entryway. We didn't even have they didn't even have
Yeah,
a room for us.
they didn't have a
But
room.
it was
We had
great.
to do it in the lobby of the gym. Yeah.
We charged $1 a piece because it cost us $1 to get the cards processed by Franklin Lifesavers, who was
Yes.
our entity under which we were working, and so we charged the kids $1, and we kind of ate up the difference with the disinfectants and all that stuff that we were using up. But that was great. Hundreds and hundreds of kids, and 3 kids that I know of that did use the CPR.
Yeah. It was rewarding to see these kids say, and some of them came back in future years after they graduated and asked to be recertified.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them had jobs where they needed it, and like lifeguards and so forth. Yeah, I became an EMT in, I don't know, in the early 80s, and I was the first police chief in Massachusetts, I believe, to be certified as an EMT. I kept that for I mostly went on and when we were stuck in the daytime, and also when we needed a third one in the ambulance. I jumped in.
I know you went on one call with me. I won't tell you what street it was on because I don't want to name the person, but that my partner was sick or something hadn't shown up, so you went with me. And on the way out, do you remember you tripped on an extension cord? And when the person paid the bill, they deducted 75 cents for the extension cord.
Oh dear, I broke the plug on the cord, yeah.
I just thought, oh my God, how could anybody do that?
Said that the ambulance was good service, but it cost me this much for the cord. Yeah, that was a funny one.
That's one of the few funny stories about being an EMT because a lot of it was sad, I thought.
Yeah.
And the trouble in a small town, I had 6 kids growing up here, and I knew a lot of the people that we were taking, or I had connections to them, and it makes it much harder. Wasn't it hard for your kids growing up in a town where you're the chief?
It sure was.
I bet how bad?
Well, sometimes they got picked on in school, and I think sometimes maybe they rebelled against me just to show me they didn't like the job. Never anything too serious, but yeah, I think kids pushed one of them around a bit in the school from time to time. I never went and said anything. I let him take care of it himself. But in fact, he wouldn't tell me that much about it. He usually found about around the circle to find it out. But
Yeah, I think it would be very hard.
it was hard for them. Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
I've asked Bob Wood sometime about, I'd like to sit down and talk to him, what it was like, because he was one of my favorite ministers in the whole world. And he's an absolutely wonderful man, and his wife is, of course, fantastic too. But how it must have been hard for their kids growing up with their parents, one parent a minister, the other one being a school nurse. So they were out to get, everybody would know what the kids were doing or get the word back to the parents. So did the school ever call you with things, or they would handle it more privately with the kids directly?
With my kids?
Yeah.
I never had calls from the school, I don't think, or from about the kids, other than, maybe routine things on their business. But no, I would find out some other way, somebody would be telling me something. Usually some other kid that knew about it would tell tell their parents, who would tell my wife. Wasn't that what she would tell me? That's how I usually found out about it. But you talked about me walking. I walked from my house to the police station every day, most every day, during my career as a police chief. And it took me some 15 minutes or something like that. And when we had the '78 blizzard, I walked up and back. My car was snowed under anyway, and it took me sometimes as much as 2 hours because everybody was out walking, and they wanted to talk to me about something. We had the town boxed off. Nobody could drive. They were ordered not to drive, so we had auxiliary police around, like Green and North and Brook and Main and stuff like that, with the town all sealed off, and so that they could work on removing more snow, and people would call me up I spent about 3 days on the phone because we had the 911 calls were ringing constantly. So we had 3 people answering the phone. I was one of them. And because most of it wasn't, most of them weren't emergencies. They were calls that I got this problem, I got that problem. But anyway, it was kind of nice in a way because they had to call me to get permission to drive. And of course, there were those that needed to go for medical care, and we arranged for trips. And there were those that had to go to work in a nursing home or a hospital or something. We arranged trips for them.
How did you handle the ambulance in the blizzard?
They had 21 ambulance trips in 2 days, I think, during the storm.
Jeepers.
It was horrible. In fact, Bob Maney, who was the police chief now, was on an ambulance trip with a couple other guys. There were 3 of them that went because one of them took a vehicle and they drove the person that was pregnant over to, I believe it was Norwood Hospital. And then they called the next day and sent the mother flowers or something. It was right there in the blizzard. But people would call up on the phone and say, I live at this number, such and such a street, and I want to go shopping for 3 of my neighbors or 4 of my neighbors. And I said, that's a great idea. Where do you want to go, Fernandez or Super Duper? I don't know whether they call it that in '78 or they called it 9 to 9.
Could have been M&M Star, I don't know.
No, it's Fernandez down there, where Shaw's is now.
But I was thinking Super Duper. I don't know whether Super Duper or M&M Star at that point. I don't know.
It was M&M, yeah. So I would say, which one do you want to go to? And they'd tell me, so I'd give them a route to go and then call the guy on that corner and say, this car's coming through. And then some people had to go to 128 to get the cars off the road. They were there for days, and once it was released, they would get a call, and people would tell them where they could get their car, and then I would have to write them a little pass to drive down to wherever they could to pick up their car. It was quite an interesting thing, and I think one of the things is I don't know of any power failures. So that made it nice, because it was after that fierce storm for 2 days, it was beautiful, beautiful weather. People were out in the sunshine skiing, ski-mobiling, riding horseback. Art Ferrara was riding the horse up around town.
See, we missed the blizzard. We had gone, my husband had a business trip down in Caribbean, and I went down for the weekend to visit him, and we were the first plane refused at Logan Airport. And my son Michael was a teenager, and he was due to pick us up, and he called the airport, and they said, oh yes, the plane is left, it'll be in. So the young boy drove all the way in the middle of that blizzard, to the airport, only to get off and out of the car and find out the plane was not there. It was sent on to Portland, Maine. So then he had to turn around and come all the way back 128, and there were 3 younger kids at the house too that he was taking care of. And I thought, oh my heavens. We thought it was a very quiet little weekend. We were leaving the kids, and then boom.
Yeah,
everything happened.
There's 100 stories. I mean, thousands of stories on that blizzard. People were confined to their business place for several days, in hotels, in gyms, and everything. It was quite a fun time.
Do you have any funny stories about being a chief?
Funny stories?
Yeah,
well,
funny
gee, I wish wish they'd pop into my head, but I had lots of them. Yeah, I did. I think one that just quickly pops to mind. We had a tip or something that the kids were going to pull a lot of fire alarms, so we put extra people here and there and everywhere trying to figure out to be the right area to try to catch them from Well, we put some stuff on the fire alarm boxes. So this other officer and I were riding in a car together, and we were kind of roving, and all of a sudden there was an alarm down on Hartford Street. So we went zipping down there. We got there pretty quick because we went too far from there, and he said, I saw the curtain move inside. So the house was all alarmed, and we used to have false alarms there a lot, and we said, wow, this is not a false alarm. So we waited and waited, and here they come out of they went and taken a fan off at the roof. So they came back out that way.
Oh.
So we said, come on down here. And so they get down, we got them on the ground, and my partner says to him, "You're under arrest," he said. "No kidding." But I thought that was so comical. Well, he didn't use the word kidding, but yeah, that was a really funny thing, because what had happened, they pulled the fan out up the top, went in, and they landed in a closet, and the closet did not wasn't alarmed, they thought, but there was a pad there, and it did set the alarm off. And so we had warning that they were in there, but it was kind of comical when he said, "No kidding," under arrest.
Well, there must have been a few murders while you were here.
Well, I think the only one that happened has never been solved, and it kind of bothers me to this day, because the fellow was missing, reported missing, something like February 1st, and he, 1986, and they didn't know anyone that could have taken him out of the house, because there was no sign of a struggle or anything like that, and his car was missing, and we couldn't figure out where he went, and there was all kinds of questions about it. Did he just take a ride, whatever? And turns out he was in the trunk of his car, dead, and the car was parked in the Corning parking lot around the corner.
Is that one you were talking about?
Around the corner from that front building there, which is now, what is it?
The Montrose School? Well, I think
no, the doctor's dentist office, I believe. Yeah. Anyway, it was parked around the corner there, and I walked past there every day, but it was, around the corner, so I didn't see it, and it just annoyed the heck out of me that I walked by that thing probably 10 times, and because it was about 5 days later when Corning said that thing has been here through a couple of snowstorms, and so sure enough, we opened up the trunk, and there he is, dead in there, and it's never been solved.
Wow, that's crazy.
It sure is. And it had hindered our investigation, because murder is the jurisdiction of the district attorney. The minute you have a murder, you have to, or a sudden death that's not reasonable, you must call the district attorney, at that time at least, and they take over, and they're in charge. So we were limited what we could do for the length of time that had gone between the time he was missing and the time he was found. It was probably, I think it was 6 days, so it's pretty hard to ask somebody, what were you doing 5 days ago or something like that on Tuesday night or something. A lot of us can't remember what we did last night, but so that was tough. It's never been solved, and that's the only one. That's the only one.
I hope it's the last one.
Yeah, well, they've had a couple since then, but that's the only one I got involved in.
Well, every time I think of you being a chief, I think of the CPR, because we did that together for so many years, but the walking. I love the fact you were so visible to the kids. You'd be down at a football game, you knew half the kids by name, they knew who you were by sight. I think that's a great thing for a chief.
Yeah, that actually got me in the Wall of Fame. I wasn't a super athlete. I played some football, but they put me in the Wall of Fame because of my support of the school sports shows. I have a picture that was in the newspaper, the local newspaper, where I had brought my lawn chair and I sat up at the Wheelock School watching a soccer game, and I had my radio down here. And that time, in those days, you had a great big radio for a portable. I used to tell the desk that I'm gone. If anybody wants me, I'm gone.
Okay.
But I'd tell her where I was going to be so that they could get me if they needed me. And I had the radio down by my side, and I'm sitting there in a lawn chair watching the game. I said, "Oh boy!" And a reporter came along and snapped it. "Was that you?"
No, it wasn't. It wasn't when I was working. Okay. Didn't work for the paper back then.
But the caption was pretty good. It said "always on duty" or something like that, which was basically true.
Yeah, that's true. It is true.
Yeah.
No, I think it was great to see you around like that, though, and people were very appreciative that they felt they became very comfortable talking to you. So if they had a problem, they would have no hesitation in going right to you face to face.
It was funny in some ways, because sometimes they didn't want to come in the station, and I've had people come up and really give me the devil on the sidewalk, and I'd say, "Wait a minute now, why don't you come in the station and talk?" "I don't want to go to the station," and they would be telling me something about their neighborhood or whatever it might be, and all excited. And usually I got them calmed down and told them I'd look into it or some such thing. But it was fun. It was actually comical. And then always kept my name in the phone book, and I used to get some lousy calls at odd hours of the day, and I was put upon by some people. Said, you shouldn't have your number in the book. I say, hey, it's been there for years. I'm not going to change my number.
Sure.
So yeah, I got some calls that I would have liked not to get, but such as threatening that my big fat body would be found in the river, things
You're
like
kidding.
that.
Did you really get one like that?
Oh, I had a series of threats. Yeah, I had a series of them.
You never found out from whom?
No, we had suspicions, but we never found out, not for sure.
That would scare me.
Well, I wasn't too worried. I wasn't feeling that they were going to do it, but it bothered my wife. I would pick up the phone in one room, and she'd pick it up in the other, and she'd come running into me, and I said, that was just a crank call, for God's sake. Of course, the bad news is they broke my windows in the car, and they broke my windows
In your personal
in
car?
the house. Yeah,
In your home?
That was early on when they were opposing authority on every corner, you know. And,
Wow. What, you scared with 2 young kids in the house?
3. But
Oh, 3, that's right.
I was angry. You know, they spray painted a car I had out front there. They tried to firebomb the car, but it didn't work.
Jeepers, I never knew this.
Oh, I had a series of them. They'd throw firecrackers under my window once in a while. But a couple of those I caught up with. They knocked my fence down. I caught them up and made them pay for it, but and get a citation for it. Mm-hmm. But it was just a period of time, you know. And as you say, once that period passed, the kids were pretty damn good, I thought, you know, overall, very good.
Because I like the accessibility. One of the things I found out being a selectman is no matter where I go, and this drives my husband crazy sometimes, go to the store, go to church, go out for dinner, take a walk with the dog, whatever, and people stop and always have some question about what's going on with this, what do you think about that? And Andy keeps saying, oh, not again, not again. But I think it's the way selectmen should be, I think it's the way a police chief should be.
Well, in that small town, that's going to happen anyway.
No, but I think it's good.
The bad news was if I stopped in the Francis Cafe for a beer, or one of the other places for a beer, then somebody would occasionally knuckle me there on something. And
often. Me too.
one time I got in a big argument with the guy there, and I said, oh my gosh, I'm in the middle of a bar here at 6 o'clock in the evening. I got to get out of here. I'm arguing with the guy because he's telling me this and I'm saying no. And come and see me up the station. But that happened occasionally. That was a drawback. If you wanted a beer, because I happen to like beer and didn't think I was doing any harm because I wasn't out there guzzling it. I was just having 1 or 2, you know.
I remember one time I was cooking dinner and I was having a beer, I don't know why, and the police station called and asked me if I'd go on an ambulance call. The EMT on duty hadn't shown up, so down I go with a half a beer in my, and I remember you got a call later that somebody smelled the beer on me and was wondering if they had allowed the EMTs to drink on duty, and I'm sure you explained it. But
I used to keep that stuff available to
that's
spray.
not a bad idea. But I stopped having a beer cooking dinner. I thought that's. So how did you meet the good Elizabeth?
Oh, because my close friend in the Army was going with her sister.
Oh.
And they were walking down the street, and I met him on the street. And
that's it?
got talking to her, and the next thing we know, we were doing more than talking, visiting, whatever, you know. So it was a happenstance. It was and she remembers to this day that I had my hand in my pocket, or a pocket unbuttoned, and an MP come and gave me heck for it, or some such thing. I said, oh, jeez.
This is when you were in Germany, correct?
Yeah, in Germany, oh yeah.
In Stuttgart or where?
Stuttgart, Germany, yeah.
Because I thought that's where she was from.
Yeah, we got married over there, and then they flew us back on a plane instead of putting us on a ship. That was pretty good because I was only a corporal. So we flew with captains and colonels and everything else. It was kind of nice.
That must have been hard for her to leave Germany.
Yeah, when the parents were in their 60s, I said, you better figure this out, that it's probably the last time you're ever going to see your parents.
Oh, geez.
And so there were a lot of tears. And luckily, with my wife's frugality, we ended up in 14 years, 1968, going back over there, the whole 5 of us, the 3 kids and her and I, we went over there and went to the father's 80th birthday.
Oh, that's
And then a couple of years later, she went to her mother's 80th birthday. I didn't go on that trip. It was a little easier for her to go and me to stay home and take care of the kids. So.
I remember Elizabeth telling me you had been over there when the Berlin Wall was coming down.
Yeah.
And she was describing that, and I thought, oh my gosh.
Yeah, we weren't close to it, but we were there and watching it on the news live and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
Whatever year that was, I've forgotten now exactly.
I don't remember either. I should remember.
80,
It was a big deal.
89 or something like that.
It was a big deal.
It was, yeah. Well, she ran across the border, you know, under gunfire to get away from there, so she would never go back to the East Zone. When they took that wall down and Germany unified, then we were able to go up there to Dresden and a few of those places. And oddly enough, we found a small town that had found the body of her brother. Oh. And several others, and arranged a little cemetery, about twice the size of this room, and put the stones up, and they had a nice plaque made on there about the number that were buried there, that they gave their lives, and so forth. It was quite a thing. It was a shock to all my wife's family, but it was really nice.
I bet it was a shock. She had one brother that died in the war, or more? Two. Mm. God. See, none of my family, I had a few cousins that were in the service, but they were not in active war type of duty. So we didn't have anything immediate in our family. We're lucky.
Like me.
Yeah, like you.
I went to the Korean War, but I went to Germany instead. They sent me to Germany.
They sent my husband to Alabama.
And so once in a while, my wife, they would say, "Where's your wife from?" I'd say, "She's a Korean War bride." Well, she doesn't look Korean.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So the worst thing about being a police chief was probably having to go to families with murders and suicides and bad news. The best thing would be?
Helping people. So many times people came in, they want to see the chief, and they'd sit down and talk to me and tell me about their problem. Whatever it may, I had a mother come in and complain to me the fact that her daughter was in a car accident and killed, and they did an autopsy on her. And, you know, it was out of my control, but she talked to me about it. You know, she felt it was terrible that they did that, and because it was a routine thing they did with a driver that was driving, even though she wasn't at fault. And I think she felt better when she went out of the place, you know. Yeah. I mean, it was tough because you feel so sorry for her that she's coming in to tell me all these things. And so there's a lot of times that people came with things like that perhaps I couldn't do anything about, but they talked to me and gave sometimes their rage and their anger, and I chatted with them and told them the situation and what I could do and couldn't do, and seemed like they walked out of there very pleased that they had gotten it off their chest. And you know, I felt good that they felt better when they left me. So
I wonder if people still do that to the
yeah,
I
wonder.
Dick Hurley I knew fairly well. I don't know.
I also, when my son was in the 5th grade, I was promoted to chief. He said to me, "Dad, Miss Merkel, well, Nancy, she became Mrs. Harrington. Right. Mrs. Harrington wants to know if you can come up and talk to us about drugs." So I got a big drug kit made. It was a big suitcase. It stood probably 4 feet off the floor. Well, we used to set it up on a table, and it was 1.5 feet wide, and it opened up. We had it locked, and then it opened up, and we had all the drugs and substances on there that kids were abusing, mostly kids, and they were all labeled, you know. And then I would go up to the 5th grade. Mrs. Harrington and a couple other classes would come in, and I would display all that stuff and give them a little chat about it, and not medically, but just tell them what it is and somewhat of what it does to your body. And I did that for 20 years, the whole term of being the police chief. I did that every year.
I know my kids were there.
Every year First it was Miss Merkel, then it was Mrs. Harrington, and the other teachers that were of the same age level, and they brought in 3 classes, I think, and I did that for 7 periods a day for 1 day a year.
Yeah, and Lauren Harrington's sister was also Miss Merkel was at the Memorial School.
Yeah,
and Lauren was at the
yeah.
Dastry School.
Lynn was down there.
But Lauren Harrington, I thought, was probably one of the very finest teachers the country's ever seen.
I thought so too.
I've tried to get her on this show, to talk to her.
Oh,
to
did
see
you?
her, because I have such a respect for her and such a high regard for her. She was, my kids just talk about her as if she's a saint.
No kidding. Well,
She was
that's good.
fun, and she laughed.
Yeah.
She was strong and stern, but she was an unbelievable teacher.
And
She grew those chicken eggs. Remember, they hatched chicken eggs?
Yeah.
We'd all take turns bringing the chickens home.
She kept. She told the kids what was expected of them during the
And
class,
they
and they did it.
That's
You
exactly
know, they could
right.
ask questions, but they had to be orderly, and they had to raise their hand, and it was great.
Yeah,
It
to me, she was
great.
an example
I
of-
enjoyed that, going there for all those years. And then I started the DARE program. It didn't really take effect until I retired, I believe, but I started it that year, my last year, and it ran successfully for several years, but then it faded. Too many negatives about it, saying it didn't do any good or anything, but everybody felt it did a lot of good with the kids on the preventative side. And that's what it was all about.
But worth a try.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to any kid that's out here watching that might ever want to be a police chief? What would you tell them to do?
Want to be a police chief?
Yeah.
Go to a psychiatrist? No. No, I think you've got to, what I found that anybody that wants to be a police officer more than likely has the reasoning of, I like to help people. I think if you went and asked 20 cops today, and more of them than not will say, I took the job because I like helping people. It's odd because you think of cops and robbers and shooting guns and all that sort of stuff, and I think with me, I'm not a very good example of a police chief. I got no education. I had not graduated from Medfield High. I got my GED in the service.
Remember you were telling me that before?
And I
wasn't going to bring it up.
and I graduated when they decided to do it here, of us service people that went away, with several of us. Bill Kelly recently died. He was one of them. And we got our diplomas in 2003. But I felt common sense was the biggest factor. Learning, yes, I had to learn a lot about different laws and management. I went to Babson for management. I went different places for different seminars on different subjects, and that helped greatly. But talk about hard knocks. I think the biggest thing you need, I think, is common sense. And I thought, in fairness, I thought I used a lot of common sense, and I thought I was as fair as I could be to everybody.
And tell me the truth, when I was I'm still chairman of the Board of Selectmen for another couple of weeks, but if I were the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, would you give me a ticket if I was driving too fast?
Well, it probably has to depend on the situation. Now, I would say probably not. However, if it was a real wild thing, I'd definitely have to. I had a selectman call me up one day and say, my friend, blah, 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 you got the ticket. And I said, wait a minute. So I went to the officer, and the officer said, hey, he was going 60 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. And then he gave me a bunch of lip.
Oh.
So I called the selectman back, and I said, I wasn't intending to do anything about this, but I just wanted to let you know what happened. But I said, furthermore, I can't tell the officers to go write tickets for infractions and then say to them, you can't do it. I'm pushing this aside. And of course, when I was on the job, we had a no-fix ticket go into effect. Prior to that, you could call up and the officer could rip it up. But we had what they called a no-fix ticket, and all the numbers were recorded, and you had to submit them back to the registry, filled out why they were there. And now you could have excuse of one being ripped or whatever, but you had to write a letter about it. So I believe that that's the way it was supposed to be handled. No fix is no fix. So I never called another department for that purpose, or anybody that called me, I say, hey, call the clerk of courts, that's where it's gone. So, in answer to your question, I've always felt that, you know, you try to be fair on the street, but are you going to book your next door neighbor when he's coming down the street? I don't know. I've stopped a guy, and it was my birthday, and it was his birthday, oddly enough. So I said, you're going about 50 miles an hour. I said, yes, sir. I said, well, happy birthday. It's my birthday today, and it's yours, so I'm going to not write you a ticket today. And he was dumbfounded, you know. So I can't honestly say whether I would book you or not.
Okay.
I might,
You
if
might.
it was that serious. But
No, you should.
it's doubtful. In a small town, you know people, and you don't usually book people, you know. Let's face it, that's a reality.
But as you said
Even
earlier,
though we try to be fair, yes.
but you said earlier, sometimes that's a good way to stop anybody from getting worse in the future. I think it's a very good idea to lay down the law and say, don't do it.
Yeah, well, if I had someone that I knew that I didn't write a ticket for, I used to say to him quite forcefully, don't embarrass me again, or something like that. You want me out doing a job, you're a taxpayer, you want me doing a job, so don't embarrass me. The strange thing about it is, I don't know if you've run into this as a selectman, but you probably have. People come and complain about speeders on their street.
Always.
We go down there with the radar, and who's speeding but one of the neighbors? Or the person himself that complained. That's happened.
Yeah, I remember the Indian Hill incident.
That's happened. Several times it's happened. They're really embarrassed at that point.
No,
It
somebody
probably
had-
doesn't seem so fast when you're behind the wheel as it does when you're standing on the street.
No, somebody had come into us to complain about speeding, so you set up speed traps, and the following day, the first person you caught was the man who came into our office to complain about speeders. And he said, what's going on? And he said, well, I want you to catch speeders. I didn't want you to catch me.
Yeah.
And you guys gave him a ticket, and I thought, whoo. I still remember that.
Yeah,
I thought that was a great thing to do.
That's a funny thing.
Yeah, but it was good.
It does happen.
Well, I think you did a good job as a chief.
Well, thank you. Thank
do.
you. I kind of feel I did my best, and I know there was a lot of things I probably could have done better, but solve that murder was one of the things I
Yeah.
would have liked to have done, and curb more drugs than we did. We got some off the street, perhaps, but not as much as we would have liked.
But I think you helped the town. I
Yeah,
think you did.
I had a good feeling about it.
And I have a good feeling about your service. But everybody at home, thanks for coming and watching Bill Mann. And I hope if you see him on the street, say, congratulations, Chief, you did a great job. As Chief as well as being interviewed. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
This program was made possible through the generous support of your Medfield friends and neighbors, folks just like you. And thanks for watching.